where you could have like the less liquid leverage position, especially after like 7 months of shakeout. I think it's less risky to get just infinite dumped on by ERC20 holders. Because like you saw the Pepe guys just infinite dump. You saw Ave infinite dump on the PRC20 side. I can't remember what other coins like those communities were just told about, and they were like infinite dump. You're like, well, yeah, but now you guys are paying $30 a swap, $20 a swap, $50 a swap, depending on the rates. If you had just moved your liquidity and your community to the superior network, you'd be paying basically nothing to swap and nothing to send, and you wouldn't be paying a huge tax to on-ramp new users. You know, if it costs $50 to swap, you're paying a $50 on-ramp tax for every new user. That sucks. That sucks a lot. That's not good. You know, it's just like when Bitcoin was $40 to send. I tried to explain this to people, but some dum-dums didn't get it. If it costs $40 to send Bitcoin forevermore, which I don't think it will, but let's say it did, then if someone sent you $40 of Bitcoin, you really have zero, because it would cost you 40 to send it to the next guy or to the exchange or to the merchant or to do anything with it. It would cost you $40. Even if you sold your private key, which no one ever does usually, because you can't prove that you deleted your copy of it, so the next guy has risk, which is why blockchain ledgers with timestamping prevents double spending, et cetera, et cetera. If it costs $40 to send Bitcoin, that means it costs you 80 to send 40, and then the guy receives it really has nothing because it would cost him to send 40 to try and use it. So you just turned 80 into zero. So if it costs $40 to use Bitcoin, it means if you spend 80, you have zero, because it cost you 80 to buy 80, but then you only received 40 because the exchange is going to charge you to receive the 40, and then it's going to cost you 40 to send. And so that guy receives actually zero. I mean, actually, it may be worse than I had originally explained it. It may cost 120 to turn into zero. So let's do the math real quick. You send $120 to the exchange. Exchanging's stupid. They don't want to lose money on you. So they're going to charge you 40 to send because it costs them 40 to send. So you buy 120 from your exchange. You pay them 40 to send it to you. Now you've got 80 left. You send 40 to your friend. It costs you 40. So now your balance is zero, and your friend received 40, but it's worth zero because you can't use it without spending 40. So now you've actually turned 120 into zero. Before, in my previous example that people argued about, the argument was that you got 80 to zero. But in actuality, if the exchange ain't stupid and they don't lose money sending you the coins, it's really turning 120 into zero. So now you've got $120 minimum tax to on-ramp someone if they're ever going to send coins to a friend. It's untenable and stupid and not why cryptocurrency was invented. It's not supposed to be worse than the legacy system. Like this. Yeah, it's, I think that Pulsechain's basically free to send so far model is pretty cool. So let's check the gas prices again. $9 to send Bitcoin, $8.49. $1.20 to send ETH, 0.0002 to send PLS. That's 50,000 times cheaper than Bitcoin, 7,500 times cheaper than Ethereum. Guys, the network is good. Works great. Oh, and the bridge is free too. Somebody set the bridge to zero fee so that using the bridge has no fee both directions. So if you go to bridge.pulsechain.com, there's no fees currently. In, out, either way, no fees. Now you're going to pay a fee on the Ethereum network. Nothing you can do about that. That's Ethereum's side, right? So you got a great network and you got a ton of free coins, and it's been worked flawlessly for 7 months. Go make it great, guys. Launch stuff on it, use it, build fiat on-ramps, make a money transmitter in your state, make a licensed money transmitter in your state, and you can, make the community better. So legal stuff. Let's talk about legal stuff. In the United States, you have something called the Constitution. The Constitution restricts the government. The Constitution's job is to restrict the government and to protect your rights. You have something called the Bill of Rights, which were amendments to the Constitution to really, really super give you a good deal and restrict what the government could do, because governments have such a history of screwing people over and over and over and over again throughout history. So what are some things in the Constitution? And these are very important things to know. And these things are so important to know that federal officers, such as Gary Gensler, the chairman of the SEC, you can go on the internet and you can search Gary Gensler's confirmation hearing, and you're going to see him swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America to defend it against enemies, both foreign and domestic. Now, you might ask yourself, what is a domestic enemy? What is a domestic enemy of the Constitution? I wonder. So the Constitution has something called the First Amendment. The First Amendment is freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Government shall make no law against free talking and all that stuff, right? Well, it turns out that Gary Gensler and the Securities Exchange Commission is actually doing a lot in violation of their oath. It turns out that they're violating a lot of what the Constitution is supposed to be protected from. So the Constitution says you have a right to freedom of movement, a right to freedom of association, a right to freedom of speech. There's other legal doctrines like the right to contract, which, if you interfere with other people's contracts as tortious interference, you can get sued for it. It can cost you money. You have a whole bunch of rights in there, right? And then there's things that are like even harsher violations. So if you're going to violate people's free speech, one of the worst ways to do that is with something called prior restraint, where you don't even give them the chance to speak. Well, listen to this. Blockchain networks are communication networks. They carry speech. The first Bitcoin block carried a copy of a newspaper article. Blockchain networks are speech. And the software that consists of blockchain networks, the nodes, the wallets, those are just word processing assistants. They just help you format your speech in a way that other participants can understand. So when you try and interfere with the blockchain, you're interfering with communication. You're interfering with communications network. You are performing prior restraint. Your interference in these things is creating a chilling effect. You are interfering with people's association. You are interfering with people's right to contract with each other. You're interfering with specific contracts. You are doing numerous, multiple things in violation of your oath to protect the Constitution. You're doing it outside of congressional authority. You're doing it outside of your mandate. So I don't understand how America became the carceral state. America has the highest rate of incarceration of any nation that's ever existed in the history of mankind. And yet you see very few lawsuits against people in the government. It just doesn't seem to match up to me. If you have extremely high rates of the government putting people in prison, shouldn't you have also high rates of some of the people being put in prison kind of suing the government for violating their rights? I mean, you go around the world and you can't even in some countries get 20 years for murder, but in the United States, they hand out time like it's candy. You can get 20 years very easily for doing lots of different things. Very easy to get 20 years in the United States. Very hard to get 20 years anywhere else. Isn't that cruel and unusual? By the way, Bill of Rights has a rule against cruel and unusual punishment. Shouldn't there be more lawsuits over this? Isn't it cruel and unusual that for things that aren't murder, you're getting what the entire rest of the world considers to be murder punishments? And I think even in the United States, you see crimes that just, you're going to get punished harder for nonviolent crimes than violent crimes in a lot of instances. Doesn't make any sense. Or like meta crime that doesn't even have a victim. These things are they're not healthy, they're not good, and it's how you end up with the highest rate of incarceration in the history of mankind. So do you really have the rights you're not willing to fight for? Probably not. So you got to fight for these rights. And it's just tragic because so few people have the funding or the ability to stand up to the blowback to fight for your rights. I mean, when the ex-president of the United States is having lawfare used against him so that he can't run for office, that's what they do in the third world. The people in power use the executive branch and the police to make it so that no one can run against them, so they just keep winning. That's not good for democracy, guys. It's really not. You're supposed to have free and fair elections where people are allowed to choose between different parties, and you're not supposed to, once again, this is just like prior restraint. You're not supposed to, before they can run, make sure they can't run, because how can you have a fair election when the people that you want to unelect are in control of who gets to run against them? It doesn't make sense. And then, if you give the government this power that they shouldn't have, at some point you'll get a bad team in charge, and that bad team will abuse that power. And so traditionally, the founding fathers figured it out, that there should be checks and balances. You shouldn't just rely on one person being good for everything to work out. You should assume that occasionally someone's going to suck, some bad guy's going to get power, and you should have a checks and balance. So, the legislative branch is supposed to write the law. The executive branch is supposed to execute it. The judicial branch is supposed to, be in the middle, making sure that everything works right between the two. Right now, the administrative state, a fourth branch of government that's not supposed to exist, of unelected bureaucrats, is writing all the laws, encumbering millions of people with regulations, and there's no counterplay. Your counterplay is to sue them in court and get them declared arbitrary and capricious. So, how many times recently has the SEC been declared arbitrary and capricious? Numerous times. Numerous. So in the Ripple case, the judge basically said that the SEC lawyers were not performing with a faithful allegiance to the law and was changing their story based on, getting whatever they wanted. The SEC just recently, their lawyers were lying in a case, and the judge caught them in the lies and said, well, now that you've been caught in these lies, explain to me why I shouldn't sanction you and fine you directly. Fine the SEC lawyer that was lying to the court. And then you see all of his bosses at the SEC jump in there like, we're sorry, Your Honor. Please don't fine us, bro. Don't sanction us, bro. We're going to retrain everybody. And so I will let you guys know where to find these specific documents. This is only a couple days old. The SEC... So then you see this guy's bosses at the SEC throwing him under the bus and throwing junior guys under the bus, if I remember correctly, and then talking about how they're going to retrain all their litigators and how they're getting rid of that guy and they're putting in new guys. And you're like, hey, you know what? You wouldn't have these problems if you just didn't lie to the judge. So you don't need to train your guys on how to not lie to the judge. And this isn't the only thing, right? The SEC has lost 4 of their last 5 cases in front of the Supreme Court. Gary Gensler likes to go on television speaking outside of his capacity of the SEC. So he'll go in interviews with people and say that he's not speaking on behalf of the SEC. Well, buddy, that means you're speaking on behalf of yourself, which means it's actionable. Okay, you are speaking on behalf of yourself, and you are moving markets, and you are manipulating markets. You, Gary Gensler, are manipulating markets outside of your authority at the SEC, which means you are personally responsible. You hear me hedging the heck out of my language because I don't want to catch a case. Not financial advice, do your own research, no forward-looking statements. But you, buddy, you're on record teaching at MIT saying that 75% of tokens are not securities, and then you get a job, you got your round trip, you got your revolving door, you got your 16 years at Goldman Sachs, but now you get to regulate Goldman Sachs. That's a good round trip you got there, buddy. You get to defend all your friends that you make all your money with. Hey, where's all your money, Gary? It's with all your friends that you're helping out by screwing the competitors, right? So in Gary's world, and by the way, so I would love to see Gary Gensler catch a charge for his manipulating markets with his speech outside of his capacity at the SEC. I would love to see him catch a charge for violating his oath. I'd love to see people suing him directly because people don't understand. When the SEC attempts to call something a security, it's like calling hugging, punching, and arresting parents for beating up their kids. It is disgusting. It is a violation of due process. It is a violation of equal protection. People that speak to each other using the blockchain deserve the same rights as people that speak to each other using pens and paper, non-digitally, analog. They should have the same protection that people that use the mail. They should have the same protection that people that use the telephone. So there's so many things going wrong right now. And it's just going to cost millions and millions of dollars to fix it. And I think you could reduce the amount of millions spent if there was some personal responsibility.